Warning, the following episode contains descriptions of mass shooting, murder, and violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Alright guys, welcome back. I am souped up on caffeine right now and coffee, and iced coffee, and I'm ready to go. I'm super excited to film today. I don't know why. I just woke up this morning and I was like, it's time to do like 17 episodes in one day, you know? If I had that much time in the day, I would. I wish I could. Anyways, I'm sure you know where you are because you clicked on the episode, but if not, hello, welcome. How are you today? My name is Christina Plord. This is the CMP podcast. I upload on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we talk about murder, crime, paranormal, bunch of stuff. I talk about it, we talk about it, and then we analyze it, you know? And you can email me at thecmppodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM or message me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our @ is the CMP Podcast. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, subscribe, rate me, review me, email me, whatever you want to do. I'm here for you. Got it? Get it? Good. Anyways, so today, ladies and gentlemen, I was inspired to do this case by My Favorite Murder. I don't know if you guys know who that is. It's a podcast run by Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff, Queens. We are going to talk about the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre. Never heard about this before. Listened to an episode the other day and I was like, why have I not heard of this before? This is crazy, wild, astounding. Anyways, let's get to it. So, let's start. James Oliver Huberty was born in Canton, Ohio, the second of two children born to Earl Vincent, a quality inspector, and Ysidro Mcdonalds Huberty. First of all, let's stop there. Ysidro Mcdonalds, that is a grand name. Love it. A homemaker. Is that like another word for a stay-at-home mom? Or did she make homes? Let me know. Both parents were devoutly religious, and the family were regular attendees at local United Methodist churches. Pause. I just realized I didn't do this. I'm getting most of my information from Murderpedia and Wikipedia. Just gonna go there just so they know, whoever writes this, you're a real one, helping us out over here. When Huberty was 3 years old, he contracted polio. To minimize the debility of his ailment, he was required to wear steel and leather braces on both legs. Although he made progressive recovery from his ailment, he would be afflicted with a mild limp for the rest of his life. In 1950, Earl Huberty purchased a 155-acre farm in Mount Eaton. Ysidro refused to live in a rural location and refused to even view the property. Shortly thereafter, Ysidro abandoned her family to perform sidewalk preaching as a Pentecostal missionary in Tucson, Arizona. Huberty found his mother's abandonment emotionally devastating, rightfully so. His father would later recollect finding his son slumped against the family chicken coop, sobbing, which is super sad that his mom left him, all because she didn't want to live in a rural area. They should have worked together and picked a place that they could both agree on, you know? Huberty was a sullen child with few friends whose primary interest was target practice. A family acquaintance would later describe him as a queer little boy who practiced incessantly with a target pistol, unquote. By his teens, Huberty was something of an amateur gunsmith. Due to his limp, his family's extreme religious beliefs, and his reluctance to socialize with his peers, Huberty was frequently targeted by bullies at Waynedale High School. An average scholar, he graduated 51st out of a class of 77 students in 1960. In 1962, Huberty enrolled at Malone College, where he initially studied sociology before opting to study at the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He graduated with honors from this institute in 1964, being issued with a funeral director's license, and the following year an embalmer's license. How many of you would want to be a funeral director? I've always thought of that, but I don't know if I want to touch dead body. Like, is it creepy? You have to have a very big interest in wanting to touch dead bodies, I think. I don't know. In early 1965, Huberty married Etna Markland, who he had met while attending Malone College. Shortly after his marriage, Huberty obtained employment at a funeral home in Canton. Although proficient at embalming, you can be quite good at it, I guess. Huberty's introverted personality made him ill-suited to dealing with members of the public, causing minor conflicts with his superiors. I'm introverted. I like being home. I like being in bed, watching Netflix, relaxing. I don't want to be out surrounded by people. Especially now with the pandemic, I could never imagine going to like a bar now. I think I'd have an anxiety attack. Like, you're just breathing on me? No. Anyways, nonetheless, Huberty worked in his profession for 2 years before opting to become a welder for a firm in Louisville. He worked for this firm for 2 years before securing a better paid position at Babcock & Wilcox in June 1969. Although reclusive and taciturn, Huberty's employers considered him a reliable worker. He willingly took overtime, earned promotions, and by the mid-1970s regularly earned between $25,000 and $30,000 per year, which is about $120,000 to $140,000 in 2020 money. Shortly after Huberty was hired by this firm, he and his wife moved into a 3-story home in an affluent section of Massillon, Ohio, in the winter of 1971. This home was destroyed in a fire. Oh, that's so sad. That's very sad. Shortly thereafter, James and Etna bought another house on the same street. They later built a 6-unit apartment building on the grounds of their first home, which they managed. They also ended up having 2 daughters, Zelia and Cassandra, born in 1972 and 1974. Huberty had a history of domestic violence, frequently slapping or punching his daughters and holding knives to their throats or beating his wife. Jeez. On one occasion, Etna filed a report with the Canton Department of Children and Family Services stating that her husband had messed up her jaw, although she later insisted on the majority of occasions he had assaulted her, he struck her only once. On the majority of occasions. He shouldn't be striking you at all. How about that? How about none? Zilpo. Beginning in 1976, Etna repeatedly attempted to persuade her husband to seek counseling to alleviate his source of stress, although he refused to seek any form of therapy. See, I can she loves him, so she wants him to get better, but then she's also being victimized. It's a sticky situation. In personal efforts to pacify her husband's temper, anxiety, and general paranoia, and to both influence and control his behavior, Etna took great efforts to minimize any possibility of agitating her husband. She also gradually developed a mechanism whereby she claimed to be able to read his future by reading, playing, or tarot cards. Huberty believed her. Etna's readings would produce a temporary calming effect, and Huberty would typically follow the recommendations his wife made in these readings. Damn, so she was like, yeah, I can read tarot cards, so I can tell you your future. And he listened to her. So, I mean, yeah, if he's going to listen and he's going to calm down and you don't want to leave him, then you go, girl. Live your best, I guess. To his neighbors and co-workers, Huberty was perceived as a sullen, ill-tempered, and somewhat paranoid individual obsessed with firearms and who harbored a mental tally of every setback, insult, or general source of frustration, real or perceived, against himself or his family within his mind. Occasionally, Huberty would retaliate in response to any real or perceived injustice in an effort to settle what he termed my debts, and conflicts with his neighbors would once lead to his detainment on charges of disorderly conduct. On one occasion, he is known to have informed the father of 2 girls who he had encouraged his daughters to fight in response to a conflict between the children. I believe in paying my debts, both good and bad. Oh, God. A conspiracy theorist and self-proclaimed survivalist, Huberty believed an escalation of the Cold War was inevitable and that President Jimmy Carter and later Ronald Reagan and the United States government were conspiring against him. Oh, so you can just see he's spiraling. Oh, this is not going to be good. Convinced of an imminent increase in Soviet aggression, Huberty believed that a breakdown of society was imminent, perhaps through economic collapse or nuclear war. But see, that sentence, I feel like a lot of people during this time felt that. Like, he's not crazy. Let's remember the Cold War, everyone. I love learning about history. Let's remember the Cold War. They were doing drills and everything for school for, God forbid, we get hit with a nuclear bomb. Like, everyone was always on. They're walking around on eggshells. Like, is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? What do we do? Where do we go? How do I survive this? So I don't think, I don't think he was crazy. I think a lot of people thought that. He committed himself to prepare to survive this perceived collapse, and provisioned his house with ample reserve supplies of non-perishable food and numerous guns, some purchased from co-workers that he intended to use to defend his home during what he believed was the coming apocalypse. According to one family acquaintance named Jim Aslanus, sidebar, I'm really sorry if I pronounce these wrong. Some of them, I look at them and I'm like, what? And I really do try. Most respectful manner, I swear. Some of them I can't pronounce. But please tell me if I'm pronouncing it wrong and you know how to pronounce it. Let me know. Huberty's home was bedecked with loaded firearms to such a degree that wherever Huberty was sitting or standing within his home, he could just reach over and get a gun. Oh, that's a lot of guns. That's a lot. Oh. And they lived in a 3-family, or a 3-story. Each firearm was loaded with the safety catch disabled. Oh. All right. Redundancy. In November of 1982, Huberty was laid off from his welding job at Babcock and Wilcox, causing him to become despondent over his dire financial situation and general inability to provide for his family. One co-worker would later recollect that upon being notified of the impending closure of this engineering firm, Huberty had made a comment indicating that if he was unable to provide for his family, he intended to commit suicide and take everyone with him. Oh, I'm sorry, if I'm working with someone, even if we're not close, and you just tell me that when you find out it's closing, I'm probably going to call the police and at least warn them. Because who's everyone? And also, you shouldn't be taking anyone with you. And also, you shouldn't, if someone made a threat of suicide, I would 100% call someone. What? No. People love you. People care. Imagine his daughters and his wife. They don't want him to die. Even though they had a rough relationship, they still love him. You know? According to Etna, shortly after her husband was made redundant, Huberty began hearing voices. In early 1983, he placed a loaded pistol against his temple, threatening to commit suicide. Etna successfully dissuaded her husband from shooting himself, although he later remarked to her, "You should have let me shoot myself." Well, no, because she loves you. She doesn't want you to do that. And also, you're the father of her children. Unable to find lasting employment in Ohio, James and Etna Huberty sold their 6-unit apartment building for $115,000 in the spring of 1983. Shortly thereafter, Huberty obtained alternate welding employment with Union Metal Manufacturing Company. This employment lasted 5 weeks before the closure of the plant. Why are they just closing? Why is every place closing? I have questions. Weeks after this redundancy, Huberty and one of his daughters were injured in a traffic accident. In the weeks following this accident, Huberty noted an aggravation in neck pains he had endured since childhood. He also noted an occasional increasing nerve tremor in his hands and arms. In the summer of 1983, the Hubertys applied for residency in Mexico, believing the money obtained from the sale of their apartment building would financially sustain the family longer in Mexico than in America. Probably. America's expensive. Having also sold their home for just $12,000 in cash in September, with the buyer assuming their $48,000 mortgage. What? What do you mean he gave them $12,000 and then just took over the mortgage? You can do that? I didn't know you can do that. I thought you just pay it. Interesting. Huberty informed family acquaintances of his intentions to relocate his family to Tijuana in search of employment opportunities, confidently stating, "We're going to show them who's boss." Oh, we're going to show them who's boss. Relax, jeez. Relocations. When Huberty and his family moved from Ohio to Tijuana in October 1983, he left all but the most essential of his family's possessions in storage in Ohio, but ensured he brought his huge collection of guns, ammunition, survival supplies with him. Of course, but leave everything else. According to published reports, Huberty's wife and daughters embraced their new environment and became friendly with their neighbors, although Huberty, who spoke little Spanish, was sullen and taciturn. Unable to find employment in Tijuana, Huberty quickly regretted his decision to relocate to Mexico. Within 3 months, the family relocated to San Ysidro, a largely poor district of San Diego, just north of the U.S.-Mexico border, which in 1984 had a population of 13,000. They rented an apartment within the Cottonwood Apartments. The fact his family were the only Anglo-Americans within this apartment complex irritated Huberty, who was notably ignorant to his neighbors. So, I'm gonna put it out there, he might have been a little racist. Because why are you gonna be irritated just because people look different than you or speak a different language? Welcome to America. The only people who aren't immigrants here are Native Americans. Ugh, this boils my blood. Anyways, shortly thereafter, Huberty applied to a newspaper advertisement offering security guard training in a federally funded program. He completed this course on April 12th and soon obtained employment with a security firm in Chula Vista assigned with guarding a condominium complex. The money earned enabled the family to have their furniture shipped from Ohio, and the family relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment on Averill Road the same month. The monthly rent for this apartment was $450. On July 10th, Huberty was dismissed from this job. His employers informed Huberty the reasons for his dismissal were his poor work performance and a noted general physical instability. And it doesn't go into right here, but based on the podcast, My Favorite Murder that I listened to, they were explaining that the reason this happened was going back to his tremor in his hands and arms. In welding, you use your hands and arms a lot, and because of the tremor, he wasn't able to work like he could before, So, let's get down to it. Buckle in, guys, okay? So, on July 15th, 1984, James Huberty commented to his wife Etna that he suspected he had a mental problem. 2 days later, on the morning of July 17th, he called a San Diego mental health clinic requesting an appointment. Leaving his contact details with the receptionist, Huberty was assured the clinic would return his call within hours because he was in mental distress, and he thought he relayed that very obviously. According to his wife, he sat quietly beside the telephone for several hours awaiting the return call before abruptly walking out of the family home and riding to an unknown destination on his motorcycle. Unbeknownst to Huberty, the receptionist had misspelled his name as Schuberty. His polite demeanor conveyed no sense of urgency to the operator, and he had elaborated in the phone call they had never been hospitalized for mental health issues. Therefore, the call had been logged as a non-crisis inquiry to be handled within 48 hours. Which is so sad. The fact that this man called for help, and just because he wasn't crying or because he hadn't been hospitalized before, that they were like, oh, he can wait, you know? That's really sad. I feel like the world in general has gotten really far when it comes to mental health, but we also have a long way to go, and it needs to be taken more seriously. If someone's calling a mental health clinic, they need, like, they're recognizing that they want help, and I think you should be calling them back within 24 hours. Personally, that's just what no matter how calm they seem, like, I've heard of people that even in the days before leading up to their suicide, they seem fine, they seem calm, they're like, love you, I'll see you later. Like, no, like, people have committed suicide, no one saw any signs. So I think it just needs to be taken more seriously. You know, if someone's calling, they need help, and they're calling you because you're the person that they think will help them. So not to call them back within 24 hours, I don't think that's fair, you know, like, super sad. Anyways, approximately 1 hour later, Huberty returned home in a contented mood. After eating dinner, Huberty, his wife, and their 2 daughters, and at this point their daughters were 12 and 10, cycled to a nearby park. Later that evening, he and Etna watched a film together on their television. You know, whatever, chillin'. He seemed fine. The following morning, Wednesday, July 18th, Huberty, his wife, and children visited the San Diego Zoo. In the course of their walk through the zoo, Huberty told his wife of his belief that his life was over. Referring to the mental health clinic failure to return his phone call the previous day, he said, well, society had their chance. After eating lunch at a McDonald's restaurant, which is McDonald's restaurant in the Claremont neighborhood of San Diego, the Huberty family returned home. Shortly thereafter, Huberty walked into his bedroom wearing a maroon t-shirt and green camouflage slacks as his wife laid relaxing upon their bed. He leaned toward Etna and said, I want to kiss you goodbye. Etna kissed her husband, then asked him where he was going, stating her intention to soon prepare dinner. Huberty calmly, very calmly, replied he was going hunting for humans. Hold the phone. If my husband looks at me and says, I'm going hunting for humans, I am going to try my absolute best not to let him leave the house. And if he does leave the house, I will be calling the police, and I will make that clear. Like, what? Come again? Say that again. What? I mean, granted, we don't know, because granted, he was abusive towards her. So, she could have been like, well, I don't want to say to him I'm going to call the cops, because then what if he can just kill me and bye, adios, like, whatever, you know? But at least when he leaves the house, I would be calling the police, like, what? That's not something that should be ignored. Anyways, holding a gun across his shoulder and carrying a box of ammunition and a bundle wrapped in a checkered blanket, Huberty glanced towards his eldest daughter, Zelia, as he walked toward the front door of the family home and said, goodbye, I won't be back. Huberty then drove down San Ysidro Boulevard. According to eyewitnesses, he drove first toward a Big Bear supermarket and then toward a U.S. Post Office branch before entering the parking lot of a McDonald's restaurant approximately 200 yards from his Avro Road apartment. McDonald's, remember? The night before, they ate at McDonald's. Connection. Wild. And also 200 yards from your apartment, like, your children are right there. Oh, I can't. Anyways, at approximately 3:56 p.m. on July 18th, Huberty drove his black Mercury Marcus sedan into the parking lot of the McDonald's restaurant on San Ysidro Boulevard. In his possession were a 9mm Browning HP semi-automatic pistol, a 9mm Uzi carbine, a Winchester 1200 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a box, and a cloth bag filled with hundreds of rounds of ammunition for each weapon. A total of 45 customers were present inside the restaurant. Entering the restaurant minutes later, Huberty first aimed his shotgun at a 16-year-old employee named John Arnold. As he did so, the assistant manager, Guillermo Flores, shouted, "Hey John, that guy's going to shoot you." According to Arnold, when Huberty pulled the trigger, nothing happened. As Huberty inspected his gun, the manager of the restaurant, 22-year-old Neva Kane walked toward the service counter of the restaurant in the direction of Arnold, as Arnold, believing the incident to be a distasteful joke, began to walk away from the gunman. Huberty fired his shotgun toward the ceiling before aiming the Uzi at Kane, shooting her once beneath her left eye. Kane died minutes later. So, just without even saying anything, just walks in. Just walks in. What? Like, and then also think about, like, people can be like, oh, like, what do you mean a guy just walked in and, like, didn't do it? Let's remember the time this is. Like, we're in the 80s, okay? A mass shooting, unheard of. It's not normal, the fact that now the children at school and just everyone in general is used to hearing about mass shootings. In this time, that was not normal. So someone walking in somewhere with a gun, you, like he thought, like, he's a kid. John Arnold, he was like, it's a joke. I mean, granted, it's a bad joke, like, what? But he doesn't think anything of it, especially when the gun doesn't go off. Like, what? So they don't realize it's legit until the manager, who's also a kid, think about it, it's McDonald's in the 80s. It's all kids. Like, oh, breaks my heart. Immediately after shooting Kane, Huberty fired his shotgun at Arnold, wounding the teenager in the chest and arm, before shouting a comment to the effect of, everybody on the ground. Huberty then referred to all present in the restaurant as dirty swine Vietnam assholes, before claiming that he had killed 1,000 and that he intended to kill 1,000 more. So, based off that, they originally thought he was a Vietnam veteran, and that's why he was doing this, like, because he had PTSD or something. But no one realized he wasn't a Vietnam veteran, you know? But they figured that out after the fact. Upon hearing Huberty's profane rant and seeing Kane and Arnold shot, one customer, 25-year-old Victor Rivera, tried to persuade Huberty not to shoot anyone else. In response, Huberty shot Rivera 14 times, repeatedly shouting, "Shut up," as Rivera screamed in pain. That sentence just gave me the goosebumps. Like blood-curdling goosebumps. Like, that's heartbreaking. I can't. I'm just I don't even know how to put this is a podcast, and right now I can't even put my thoughts into words. Just reading that, As staff and customers tried to hide beneath tables and service booths, Huberty turned his attention towards 6 women and children huddled together. He first killed 19-year-old Maria Colmenero Silva with a single gunshot to the chest, then fatally shot 9-year-old Claudia Perez in the stomach, cheek, thigh, hip, leg, chest, back, armpit, and head. Oh my God. Oh. She's 9. She's 9. She's at McDonald's with her she's 9. Oh my God. That poor angel. With his Uzi. He then wounded Perez's 15-year-old sister, Imelda, once in the hand with the same weapon, and fired upon 11-year-old Aurora Pina with his shotgun. Let's also, the reason that there's a lot of Spanish names as well is that they are in the area of San Diego. It's very, very close to the Mexican border, so there's a very big just Mexican community in that area. I mean, just all of just Southern California, Texas, just all over there, because it's so close to the border, you know? Just like how in Maine, like northern Maine, like there's a lot of French people because Canada's right there. So yeah. And based off, also, like, going back to what was said about how he was mad in the apartment building because there was, him and his family were the only, like, people who didn't speak Spanish. But then you'll move to Mexico, and then you'll come back, and then you'll kill all the, like, I think he was definitely racist in some capacity. And it's disgusting, the racial discrimination that people have to experience. Not only now, but even, this was in the 80s, like, this was so, like, it just shows how little progress we have made in some ways, you know? Yeah. So he fired upon 11-year-old Aurora Pina with his shotgun. Pina, initially wounded in the leg, had been shielded by her pregnant aunt, 18-year-old Jackie Reyes, who shot Reyes 48 times with the Uzi. Is that necessary? Really? He's just going on a rampage at this point, you know? He's just anyone and everyone. Beside his mother's body, 8-month-old Carlos Reyes sat up and wailed, whereupon Huberty shouted at the child, then killed the baby with a single pistol shot to the center of the back. Oh my God. He didn't even have time to live, you know? Huberty then shot and killed a 62-year-old trucker named Lawrence Verse Lewis before targeting a family seated near the play area of the restaurant who had tried to shield their son and his friend beneath the tables with their bodies. 31-year-old Blythe, it's Blythe, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Rhian Herrera had shielded her 11-year-old son, Mateo, beneath one booth as her husband Ronald protected Mateo's friend, 12-year-old Keith Thomas, beneath a booth directly across from them. Ronald Herrera urged Thomas not to move, shielding the boy with his body. Thomas was shot in the shoulder, arm, wrist, and left elbow, was not seriously wounded. Ronald Herrera was shot 6 times in the stomach, chest, arm, hip, shoulder, and head, but survived. He survived? What? Oh, thank goodness. His wife, Blythe, and son, Mateo, were both killed by numerous gunshots to the head. That's heartbreaking. That's because he's trying to save everyone, and he comes. Oh my God, my heart breaks for these people. Nearby, 3 women had also attempted to hide beneath a booth. 24-year-old Guadalupe Del Rio lay against a wall. She was shielded by her friends, 25-year-old Gloria Ramirez and 31-year-old Arisdelcy Vuelvas Vargas, Arisdelsi. I'm sorry. Del Rio was hit several times but was not seriously wounded. Ramirez was unhurt, whereas Vargas received a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. She died of her wound the next day, the only person fatally wounded who lived long enough to reach a hospital. At another booth, Huberty killed 45-year-old banker Hugo Velasquez with a single shot to the chest. The first of many calls to emergency services was made shortly after 4 p.m., notifying police of the shooting of a child who had been taken to a post office on San Ysidro Boulevard. Oh, wait. So 4 p.m. So, let's go back. So, 3:56, he walks into the restaurant. At 4 o'clock is when they go. So, yeah, so pretty close. But then, this makes me angry. Not because, let's just get into it. So, the dispatcher mistakenly directed responding officers to another McDonald's 2 miles from the San Ysidro Boulevard restaurant. This error delayed the imposition of lockdown by several minutes, and the only warnings to civilians walking, riding, or driving toward the restaurant were given by passers-by. And it's not. I don't want to blame the dispatch because it was an accident. It's not like they're doing it on purpose. It was an accident, but more people could have survived if they got there sooner. And it's so, granted, I'm sure the dispatcher knows. I'm sure the dispatcher inside is like, I can't believe I messed that up, and so I'm not saying they should have guilt, because they shouldn't. What he did, they shouldn't even be dealing with that situation. He should have never done that. But it's heartbreaking to think of maybe more people would have survived if they got there sooner, you know? Shortly after 4 o'clock, a young woman named Lydia Flores drove into the parking lot. Stopping at the drive-thru window, Flores noticed shattered windows and the sound of gunfire before, and I quote, looking up, and there he was just shooting. Flores reversed her car until she crashed into a fence. She hid in some bushes with her 2-year-old daughter until the shooting ended. then when I first heard this, I was thinking, like, you reversed your car and hit a fence, like, you have drive off. But I think she, like her car couldn't move. So her and her 2-year-old got out of her car and then hid in the bush. I can't even imagine the fear that she was feeling, like, because she's trying to save her daughter, you know? When they were just trying to get some McDonald's, some chicken nuggets. What? At approximately 4:05 p.m., a Mexican couple, Astolfo and Maricela Felix, drove toward one of the service areas of the restaurant. Noting the shattered laminated glass, Astolfo initially assumed renovation work was in progress, that Huberty, striding toward the car, was a repairman. Oh my God, he was walking towards their car? See, I didn't know that. He was walking towards the car? He was just in the parking lot. I thought he was still in the restaurant. Was a repairman. Huberty fired his shotgun and Uzi at the couple and their 4-month-old daughter, Carlita, striking Maricela in the face, arms, and chest, blinding her in one eye and permanently rendering one hand unusable. Her baby was critically wounded in the neck, chest, and abdomen. Astolfo was wounded in the chest and head. As Astolfo and Maricela staggered away from Huberty's line of fire, Maricela gave their baby to her husband. Astolfo handed the shrieking child to a young woman named Lucia Velasco as his wife collapsed against a car. Velasco rushed the baby to a nearby hospital as her husband assisted Astolfo and Maricela into a nearby building. All 3 members of the Felix family survived. Yes! Yes! Oh, at least more people survived. Oh. 3 11-year-old boys then rode their bikes into the west parking lot to purchase sundaes. Oh, they just wanted some sundaes. Hearing a member of the public yell something that they couldn't understand from across the street, all 3 hesitated before Huberty shot the 3 boys with his shotgun and Uzi. Joshua Coleman fell to the ground, critically wounded in the back, arm, and leg. He later recalled looking toward his 2 friends, Omar Alonso Hernandez and David Flores Delgado, noting that Hernandez was on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to his back, and had started vomiting. Delgado had received several gunshot wounds to his head. Oh, that poor baby. Coleman survived. Hernandez and Delgado both died at the scene. That's so sad. Huberty next noticed an elderly couple, 74-year-old Miguel Victoria Ulloa, Ulloa, and 69-year-old Ida Velasquez Victoria, walking toward the entrance. As Miguel reached to open the door for his wife, Huberty fired his shotgun, killing Ida with a single gunshot to the face and wounding Miguel. Oh my God. He was opening the door. So I'm just imagining him opening the door and like stepping to the side, and then him is just watching his wife get shot. Oh, that. An uninjured survivor, Oscar Mondragon, later reported observing Miguel cradling his wife in his arms and wiping blood from her face, shouting curses at Huberty, who then approached the doorway, swore at Miguel, and then killed him with a shot to the head. Oh no, baby. That's so sad. Approximately 10 minutes after the first call had been placed to emergency services, police arrived at the correct McDonald's restaurant. So it's only been 10 minutes. And honestly, with what I've read, it's felt like this has been going on for an hour. But it's only been 10 minutes. Like, he's going on a rampage. The first officer on the scene, Miguel Rosario, rapidly determined the location and cause of the actual disturbance and relayed this information to the San Diego Police Department as Huberty fired at Rosario's patrol car. Officers deployed immediately, imposed a lockdown on an area spanning 6 blocks from the site of the shootings. The police established a command post 2 blocks from the restaurant and deployed 175 officers in numerous strategic locations. These officers were joined within the hour by several SWAT team members who also took positions around the restaurant. As Huberty was firing rapidly and alternating between firearms, police initially were unaware of how many individuals were inside the restaurant. Oh, so they had no idea what they were about to walk into. Furthermore, because most of the restaurant's windows had been shattered by gunfire, reflections from shards of glass provided an additional difficulty for police focusing inside the restaurant. Initially, police were concerned the gunman or gunmen may be holding hostages, although one individual who had escaped from the restaurant informed police there was a single gunman present in the premise, holding no hostages and shooting any individual he encountered. They told you. No. You know? What? The way that sentence made it sound was like the police were like, there may be a gunman. Like, someone who was there was like, no, there's really not. And they were like, but there might be. And they're like, no. What? At 5:05 p.m., all responding, so he got there around 3:56. This is at 5:05, so an hour now. All responding law enforcement personnel were authorized to kill the perpetrator should they obtain a clear shot. Several survivors later reported observing Huberty walk toward the service counter and adjust a portable radio, possibly to search for news reports of his shooting spree, before selecting a music station and further shooting individuals as he danced to the music. As he was dancing? Like this is some sort of game? Shortly thereafter, Huberty searched the kitchen area, discovering 6 employees and shouting, "Oh, there's more, you're trying to hide from me." In response, one of the female employees screamed in Spanish, don't kill me," before Huberty opened fire, killing 21-year-old Paulina Lopez, 19-year-old Elsa Barboa Fierro, and 18-year-old Margarita Padilla, and critically wounding 17-year-old Albert Leos. They're babies. They're so, like, this is probably their first job, and they're just trying to make some money, to have a little spending money on the weekends. You're trying to hide from me. Like, he's literally hunting them. Like, what? Immediately before Huberty had begun shooting, Padilla grabbed the hand of her friend and colleague, 17-year-old Wendy Flanagan, before the two began to run. Padilla was then fatally shot. Flanagan, 4 other employees, and a female customer hid inside a basement utility room. They were later joined by Leos, who had crawled to the utility room after being shot 5 times. Oh, so they were that's in the completely other room. So some were, like, hiding. Oh, good. When a fire truck drove within range, Huberty opened fire and repeatedly pierced the vehicle with bullets, slightly wounding one occupant. Hearing a wounded teenager, 19-year-old Jose Perez, moaning, Huberty shot him in the head. The boy slumped to dead in the booth. What? Perez died alongside his friend and neighbor, 22-year-old Gloria Gonzalez, and a young woman named Michelle Carncross. At one point, Aurora Pena, who had lain wounded beside her dead aunt, baby cousin, and 2 friends, noted a lull in the firing. Opening her eyes, she saw Huberty nearby staring in her direction. He swore and threw a bag of french fries at Pena, then retrieved his shotgun and shot the child in the arm, neck, and jaw. Aurora Pena survived, although she would remain hospitalized longer than any other survivor. Oh my God. So she was alive. She was keeping her eyes closed, laying next to her dead family, and then she was like, oh, maybe he's done, and opens her eye, and he's staring at her. Her heart must have dropped. Like, thank God she survived, honestly. So then, at 5:17 p.m., so an hour and 17 minutes into that, Huberty walked from the service counter toward the doorway close to the drive-in window of the restaurant, affording a 27-year-old police SWAT sniper named Charles Foster, deployed to a strategic position on the roof of a post office directly opposite the restaurant, an unobstructed view of his body from the neck down through his telescopic sight. Foster fired a single round from a range of approximately 35 yards. The bullet entered Huberty's chest, severed his aorta just beneath his heart, and exited through his spine, leaving an exit wound 1 inch square and sending Huberty sprawling backwards onto the floor directly in front of the service counter, killing him almost instantly. Yeah, if you sever your aorta, that's literally that's your lifeline right there. Done. And this is a quote from Charles Foster, who was the SWAT sniper. He said, "I never did see his face. The first time I was actually able to see Huberty, he was sitting on a counter in about the middle of the building. Then he got up and started walking toward the door, where we had a better view of him from the neck down. He stopped about 6 feet from the door, so I took the shot. He dropped the Uzi and was thrown back a few feet. So, immediately after shooting Huberty, Foster relayed to other responding officers he had killed the perpetrator and that his focus remained on the motionless suspect. Nonetheless, as so many rounds had been expended from different firearms within the restaurant, police were not completely certain the sole perpetrator was deceased. Entering the restaurant approximately 1 minute later, a police sergeant focused his gun upon Huberty as he noted the movements of a wounded girl. When asked if the deceased male was the suspect, the girl nodded her head. It doesn't say which of the girls was it, but someone was like, yep, that's her. The entire incident had lasted for 77 minutes, during which time Huberty fired a minimum of 257 rounds of ammunition, killing 20 people and wounding as many others, one of whom was pronounced brain dead upon arrival at a hospital and died the following day. 17 of the victims were killed inside the restaurant and 4 in the immediate vicinity. Only 10 individuals inside the restaurant were uninjured, 6 of whom had hidden inside the basement utility room. Several victims had tried to staunch their own wounds and or the wounds of their companions with napkins, often in vain. Of the fatalities, 13 died from gunshot wounds to the head, 7 from gunshots to the chest, and one victim, 8-month-old Carlos Reyes, from a single 9mm gunshot to the back. The victim, whose ages ranged from 4 months to 74 years, were predominantly, though not exclusively, of Mexican or Mexican-American ancestry, reflecting local demographics. So yeah, like what I was saying about how they're right there. Prior to shooting several of the victims, Huberty had shouted accusations or insults. On one occasion, he had also shouted that he himself did not deserve to live, but that he was taking care of this matter. Although Huberty had repeatedly shouted throughout his shooting spree that he had been a veteran of the Vietnam War, he never actually served in any military branch. Initial reports issued by the San Diego Police Department following the massacre indicated Huberty had shot all injured or killed within the restaurant in the initial minutes after he had first entered the restaurant. This claim was hotly disputed by survivors, who stated Huberty had shot both wounded and unwounded people over 40 minutes after he had first opened fire. So San Diego Police Department was like, he did all this within like a couple minutes, but the people who were actually there were like, no, that's not true. Didn't happen, you know? So now we're going to the aftermath. The day after the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre, reporters visited James Huberty's father in Mount Eaton, Ohio, to garner information about his son. Having discussed his son's childhood and the family's religious background, Earl Huberty pointed to a painting of a lost sheep by the Jordan River before beginning to weep, informing reporters, "Yesterday was the worst day of my life. I feel so sorry for those people." McDonald's temporarily suspended all television and radio advertisements in the days following the massacre in an act of solidarity. Arch rival fast food chain Burger King also temporarily suspended all forms of advertising. Huberty's body was cremated on July 23, 1984. No official religious service was observed throughout this act. His ashes were returned to his widow and later interred in his home state of Ohio. In the weeks following the massacre, Huberty's wife and daughters received numerous death threats, forcing them to temporarily reside with a family friend. All 3 would attend counseling sessions for over 9 months. See, that I don't agree with that, because at the end of the day, he was his own, like, they didn't make him do these things. They didn't give him the drive to do these things. They didn't tell him to do these things. They didn't even know he was going to do these things. Granted, do I think his wife should have called the police after he said to his wife that he was going to go hunt humans? Yes, I do. But besides the fact, she didn't tell him to do these things. So I don't think she should be given death threats, because he's a grown man. Like, we need to let go of this belief that women have this control over their husbands, or husbands have this control over their wives. Like, no, everyone's their own person. They make their own decisions. You are, in the end, like, responsible for your own decisions, not your family. Like, I've never understood that, like, threatening someone's family when they did something terrible. Because 9 times out of 10, the families are like, we didn't know he was going to do this. Like, we had no idea, you know, like, they're usually good people, and then they're over here, like, doing terrible things, but they had no hand in that. I mean, it's a case by case, but I don't know. Ugh. So, Tom A. Newman, UC San Diego Medical Center physician, gave this quote describing his initial impressions upon surveying the San Ysidro Mcdonald's restaurant. It was like they had just stopped in time. All these bodies were laying around, heads were slumped on the table. The old man walking out the door was lying on the floor, donuts beside him. The 2 kids were dead by their bikes. The infant was dead in the arms of the people. There were 2 burned hamburgers on the grill. That's so sad. Etna Huberty and her daughters initially relocated from San Ysidro to Chula Vista, where Zelia and Cassandra enrolled in school under assumed names. 1 year later, the family moved to the town of Spring Valley. Because of the sheer number of victims, local funeral homes had to use the San Ysidro Civic Center to hold wakes for each victim. The local parish, Mount Carmel Church, were forced to back-to-back funeral masses in order that each of the dead could be buried in a timely manner. Several police officers who responded to the scene of the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre suffered symptoms including sleep withdrawal, loss of memory, and guilt in the months following the incident. A study commissioned by the National Institute of Mental Health and conducted by the chief psychologist of the San Diego Police Department in 1985 concluded several officers suffered PTSD as a result of the incident. Which, I mean, yeah, like, they walked into a literal massacre. I could not even imagine. It's like the Sandy Hook shooting. I live in Connecticut, and when that happened, I was a sophomore in high school, and it was the stories that were coming out, and my aunt and uncle worked in the state police department, and a lot of state police responded to that, so they knew some of the police officers that were responding to that, and I remember them telling me, like, people are just not the same anymore. Like, they know people who, after that day, they were never the same again, and, which is super sad, because, like, they're police officers, they're signing up, but, like, no police officer signs up to be a police officer in hopes that they deal with a massacre one day, or a school shooting one day. You know, like, they want to protect people to avoid these things. At least the good ones, you know. The San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre prompted the city of San Diego to assess the tactical methods by which they responded to incidents of this nature and the firearms in the possession of responding officers. The police department increased training for special units and purchased more powerful firearms in order to better equip law enforcement to respond to scenarios of this magnitude. According to one officer who confessed to having felt inadequate because he had been equipped with a .38 caliber revolver on the day of the massacre, the time had come where you had to have a full-time, committed, and dedicated, highly trained, well-equipped team able to respond rapidly anywhere in the city. On August 2nd, San Diego Police Chief William Colander had a press conference to disclose the results of the San Diego Police Department's inquiry into their response to the massacre, and the fact an estimated 73 minutes had elapsed between the time the first police officer had arrived at their restaurant and Huberty's death. The results of this internal inquiry found that although the arrival of SWAT team members was delayed by rush hour traffic, the police acted appropriately in their method of response. Colander stated any suggestion police should have stormed the restaurant was ludicrous, adding that officers had been unable to obtain a clear view of the gunman because windows had been spiderwebbed by bullet holes, making visibility in direct sunlight difficult. Colander finished his report by stating, "I believe the operation was handled the way it should have been handled." When questioned in regards to the actual motive behind Huberty's murder spree, Colander dismissed any notion of a racial motive behind the massacre, informing reporters he didn't like anybody. Within 2 days of the massacre, the restaurant had been refurbished and renovated. The restaurant planned to again open for business in the hope that, as one employee commented, the building would become just another McDonald's. Following discussions between community leaders and executives, a decision was reached on July 24th that the restaurant would not reopen. The renovated restaurant was demolished at midnight on September 26th. 100% it shouldn't be reopened. It should be demolished. In 2 days, they refurbished it and renovated it. Within 2 days of the massacre. You just had 50 people murdered on your property, and in 2 days you were like, everything's back to normal. That's corporate America for you. Gotta make as much money as possible. That's ridiculous. Following the closure and demolition of the restaurant, McDonald's donated the ground to the city with the stipulation that no restaurant be constructed upon the site. Good. For over 4 years, alternate plans to convert the site into either a memorial park or a shrine to the dead were considered. The land was sold in February of 1988 to Southwestern College for $136,000, with the agreement that a 300 square foot area in front of the campus extension the college intended to construct be set aside as a permanent memorial to the 21 victims who died in the massacre. McDonald's later constructed another restaurant 2 blocks from the site of the massacre upon West San Ysidro Boulevard. The restaurant chain also announced a commitment to donate $1 million to a survivors fund, with the widow of McDonald's founder Ray Kroc also adding a personal contribution of $100,000 to assist with burial costs, financial aid for relatives of the deceased, and counseling for survivors. The sum total of donations received by this fund would exceed $1.4 million. See, that's good. Help them out. And excuse me, I said that 50 people had been killed on the property. No, it was 21 people, but another 20 victims had been injured. 40, the brain works in weird ways. Good though, because they do need help. Like, you can't just be like, okay, it's over with, goodbye. Like, no. And good, McDonald's donated money, because they should. Amidst impromptu protests from some San Ysidro residents and donors, Etna Huberty received the first payout from... What? She received the first payout from the fund that was created for the survivors of people who were there? That doesn't make any sense. Assist with burial costs, financial aid for relatives of the deceased, and counseling for survivors. Yeah, the people who were there. What? Oh. A permanent memorial to those killed in the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre was formally unveiled on December 13th, 1990. This memorial consists of 21 hexagonal white marble pillars ranging in height from 1 to 6 feet, each bearing the name of one of the victims. The sculpture was designed by a former Southwestern College student named Roberto Valdez, who said of its inspiration for the design, "The 21 hexagons represent each person that died, and they are different heights, representing the variety of ages and races of the people involved in the massacre. They are bonded together in the hopes that the community, in a tragedy like this, will stick together like they did." The monument is located at 460 West San Ysidro Boulevard. Each anniversary of the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre sees this monument decorated with flowers. On the 3 days people of Mexican heritage observe the Day of the Dead, candles and offerings are brought on behalf of the victims. Several family members of those killed, along with survivors of the massacre, filed lawsuits against McDonald's and the San Diego Police Department. These suits were heard in the San Diego County Superior Court. All lawsuits were consolidated and later dismissed before trial on a defense motion for summary judgment. The plaintiffs appealed this ruling. On July 25th, 1987, the California Court of Appeals affirmed summary judgment for the defendants, ruling McDonald's or any other business has no duty of care to protect patrons from an unforeseeable assault by a murderous madman, and the implemented security measures typically used by restaurants to deter criminals, such as guards and closed-circuit television cameras, could not possibly have deterred the perpetrator, as he did not care about his own survival. I mean, he definitely didn't care about his own survival. He knew he was going to die, I think. Furthermore, the San Diego Police Department were also exonerated of any culpability or negligence, with the appellate panel ruling, "In view of sheer horror of the ordeal, it is difficult to imagine anything the police could have done or failed to do which would have made the risk any greater than that to which the victims were exposed before the police arrived." The final lawsuits were dismissed in August of 1991. In July of 1986, Etna Huberty filed a lawsuit against both McDonald and her husband's longtime former employer, Babcock and Wilcox. The civil suit, seeking $5 million in damages, asserted her husband's murder spree had been triggered by a combination of a poor diet and her husband working around highly poisonous metals without adequate protection over the course of many years. The suit specifically cited that no traces of either drugs or alcohol had been discovered in Huberty's body at his autopsy, negating any possibility of his actions being influenced by either factor, and that the alleged accrual of the high levels of lead and cadmium discovered in Huberty's body at his autopsy had most likely accumulated via an ongoing exposure to the fumes inhaled during the 13 years he had been employed as a welder without sufficient respiratory protection by Babcock and Wilcox, and that a combination of Huberty's exposure to these chemicals with his ingesting high levels of monosodium glutamate in the staple McDonald's food he had regularly consumed had induced delusions and an uncontrollable rage. This lawsuit was dismissed in 1987. Etna Huberty died of breast cancer in 2003. Survivor Albert Leos later became a police officer. He served in several police departments in the South Bay region of San Diego County and later joined the San Diego Police Department. And if you guys are interested, in 2016, the documentary filled 77 minutes. The 1984 San Diego McDonald's Massacre focuses upon the murders. It was directed by Charlie Min, and it features interviews with many individuals that were in the restaurant at the time of the murders and the SWAT sniper who ended the massacre. And that is the San Ysidro Mcdonalds Massacre. That's like a heavy one. That's super, just that many people in that short of time, and the fear, like they don't know this man, they're just at work, they're trying to have some lunch, and this happens, and my heart breaks for these people. Part of me finds it really upsetting as well that his wife got the first payout when there's survivors who had to be in the hospital for months and deal with the psychological trauma that this caused them, that didn't get anything at first. That's heartbreaking. I don't know. I think there was a lot of different ways that it could have gone differently, and it should have gone differently, and maybe more people would have lived, and a lot of young people lost their lives because of neglect. Like, you can see the breakdown of his own mental health. You can see when he tried to reach out how it didn't help. You can see how you can say maybe the police officer should have gone in quicker. Maybe the dispatcher should have known where she was sending them. And there's all of these, like, well, if they did this, what would have happened to these people? And it's, at the end of the day, it's a tragedy what happened to these people. And I think it's just the fact that massacres and school shootings and everything is now a normal part of life, it makes you look at humanity in a different way, you know? Like, I can understand why people don't like leaving their houses or going to places that are really busy, because there is a chance of this. Like, especially when I started going to college, like, it's so easy to walk on a college campus. We've seen how many college campus school shootings. Like, anyone can, in my college specifically, anyone can walk on our campus and walk into any building easily. And that's just, and the fact that, like, going to college, you think that, versus, like, 30 years ago, like, you go to college and you don't think that. But I think when it comes to mental health, there's a lot of holes in the system that need to be filled. I think it's when it comes to gun control, there's needs to be better screening process, especially for people with mental health disorders, and they not just assume just because someone's bipolar that they're crazy. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But there's some people that shouldn't own a gun because of things not even they can do other people, to themselves. Like, it's a safety issue for themselves too. No one should kill themselves. No one should kill other people, and it's incidents like these, it's heartbreaking. So yeah, that is the case of the San Ysidro McDonald's Massacre. Email me, comment, tweet me if there's anything else you'd like to, or even just your opinions on this case. I love hearing what you guys have to say about this. It's, like I said, it's upsetting and it's a hard case. So I feel like, especially with true crime and everything, the community that's around it, we can all discuss things and really just try and bring awareness to this stuff in a way, you know, like, so these people aren't forgotten. You know, like, these were people, they had dreams, they had lives, they had families, and we don't want them to be forgotten at all, you know? So yeah, so thanks for tuning in again. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye!